Hello and welcome to The World and Hospitality, a new podcast powered by Muse. Every week we pick one topical industry relevant word for our guests and get their teeth into it and share their takes on it. This week our word is adapt. What kind of hospitality industry do you think we'll have evolved into after all of this? We have three brilliant speakers from Domio, the Student Hotel, and Lifehouse to share their views. So without further ado, here they are. Welcome to the Muse podcast. I'm joined by fantastic guests here. So there's Calvin Anderson of Domio, Rami Zaidan of Lifehouse, and Charlie McGregor from the Student Hotels. I think I just wanted to start off with just asking you guys to introduce yourselves and to introduce the brand for some of our kind of viewers and listeners.
Do you want to go?
Sorry. I'll go with Calvin first.
Hey, this is Calvin Anderson. Great to be here. I'm a Chief Commercial Officer of Domio, which is a apartment hotel company that kind of was birthed out of a vacation rental space, much like a Sonder or Lyric. But then ultimately we really realized that operating models are very difficult when you're trying to drive consistency, when you've got several apartments all over a city. If you really want to create an experience for your guests where you're controlling everything from the doorman to what happens in the room, the hotel model has something right. And so our objective was to take the best of both worlds and to move fully into the brand and management space away from the leasing space, and really drive an experience for the consumer that allows us to be accessible on the vacation rental platforms just as much as the hotel platforms. And you have the entry, the hotel experience in the lobby, the gym, the pool, rooftop pool and all of that. But when you open the hotel door, you have a full 1, 2, 3, or 4 bedroom apartment at your disposal. Again, that really is the objective. It has a lot of kind of traditional Airbnb features, which is the front desk does not need to check you in. You've taken care of everything on the app. It's keyless entry. You walk in the door. So if you don't want to talk to anyone, you don't have to. In the same regard, it's definitely an upgrade from a world where you're in an elevator and you're an imposter in someone else's permanent home. Which has maybe no surprise turned out to work out probably all right in the COVID environment. It's a product that is valuable because you have in-unit washer and dryer, fully loaded and equipped kitchens, everything you need to live long or short term.
Nice, that's great. So Rami, over to you.
Yeah, Rami Zaidan, pleasure to be here. And I'm the founder and CEO of Lifehouse, which is a tech-enabled brand and management company at our core. We really didn't seek to necessarily massively disrupt the hotel experience. Our view was there's a lot of great lifestyle boutique products out there that aren't coupled with great sophisticated management. And simultaneously, similar to what Calvin said, the hotel operating model is quite broken, with software really being the bottleneck of that, which you're obviously no stranger to, Richard. And so we tried to disrupt the operational model really at our core, and coupling that with a really locally rooted lifestyle brand that is also scalable and can scale without dilution. So each one of our properties is truly rooted to its locale and kind of tells the story of the neighborhood. So our guests can always have a consistent, reliable luxury hotel experience, and also have a place to work, a place to eat, a place to entertain, take meetings, and meet locals and interact in the community as well. We're just getting started.
Nice. So Charlie, I think that leads in quite well to you.
Yeah, thanks Richard. Nice to meet you guys. So Charlie McGregor from the Student Hotel. We approached the hospitality business with no intention of being in the hospitality business as such, which makes it interesting for all of us, I think. My background was student accommodation, and when I moved to Holland, I wanted to disrupt student accommodation as we knew it in the UK, where I'd been doing my business. I wanted to create communal spaces, flexible living, many, meeting spaces, try and get the public and mums and dads involved and stuff like that. The rules and regulations in Holland were very, very restrictive for residential, which student accommodation fell into. So I realized that if I operated as a hotel, I was in a planning definition which had actually a lot of flexibility. There's very little rules and regulations on how big or small your rooms can be or have to be, how much rent you can charge, what is the role of a landlord, the right of the tenants and stuff. So I always knew we wanted to look after our customers. So I was never worried about being a very strict landlord and having all these step-in rights. What we didn't know, and what we do know now, is that the hospitality industry was in need of big disruption. And the reason why we've become so successful is because the grassroots demand for our hotel rooms has really overwhelmed us. What I mean by that is people like us, but also much, much older people were staying in our buildings and choosing us over the Hiltons, the Marriotts, because they felt that experience was just killing them. And what the experience what you will experience when you walk into a student hotel is a very vibrant, active ground floor at all times of day and night, because you have a fixed community living there. The students are coming for 5, 10, 12 months. We extended those type of rooms into co-living. So we have young professionals, trainees, graduates, stagiaires, the whole thing. They're all part of our community as well. And of course, then you have the hotel guests coming for 1 or 2 or 3 nights. But the ground floor is a community-based experience. So as a hotel guest, you feel this warmth and energy that everybody's talking to each other. You're not necessarily part of it, but you feel that you may be part of it if you want to. So it's an opt-in, opt-out as a hotel guest. We're an asset-heavy company. So we buy our own projects, we develop them, and we operate them. We've got 6,000 rooms operational today, and we're building another 6 or 7 as we speak. And of course, at this moment, we think that owning the assets today is an advantage in a COVID situation rather than just leasing them.
Yeah, nice. Like I really, I think all 3 models, I think for me are really, really interesting. And I think, there's a lot of, I think, flux within hospitality. I think the one part that I do really, really like about, I guess, your concept, actually, Charlie, maybe to start off from there is, the idea that, that you would have somebody, and I think you articulated it really, really well with a new video that I think you put out to kind of explain your brand a little bit better, to kind of, it's about the idea of staying curious. And I really like the image that you have of the older man basically kind of revving up his bike. And it does kind of speak to the idea that you're actually you're not staying in a place because you need a place to sleep, but because you actually kind of want to be part of a community, part of an identity almost. And I think that's something that I think is happening a little bit more. And I think just before the call, I like to kind of sometimes think of, especially your brand, as something that represents almost a first successful execution of almost a subscription model within hospitality, where essentially you have somebody kind of also subscribing for 3 years to kind of stay within within your brand. Do you think that that's a kind of fair way to look at it as well, or how do you think that those, I guess, kind of long-term stay lifestyle models to actually kind of be part of something, and plus coupled with, for example, places where you need to be for whether it's work, study, or play?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Meld?
I think it's interesting what Calvin said about Airbnb, and also your company, Calvin, and the sort of community-based giving experience or individualization, being in your own space without being in somebody else's home. And I think there's definitely a cultural change. I mean, for me, there's a massive change in the way that work and life today are completely intermingled. If you're in your nice job, I mean, now I don't really feel that I'm working. This is a nice experience, nice to meet new people. So the way we work and live has blended into one. So you want to be able to do things very close by. I think when you look at community-based experiences, was maybe triggered by the lack of personality in the hotels. Even Airbnb was saying you're a community because you're meeting the host So you're meeting there, the host, and you're being welcomed and stuff like that. So I think there's a big difference when you're looking to go traveling with your family. I would indeed be pretty quickly looking for an apartment, because I'm looking for those facilities that you just don't find in a hotel anymore. And I think what we're doing by mistake is kind of rekindling the essence of hospitality, providing many different room categories for many different customers and letting them do what they want when they want, and not having too many, guidelines on how to be funny or how to be cozy or how to be cool, just letting people be themselves, the staff, the guests, letting them do whatever they want. And you're coming as close as you can to being in your own home, because you feel this community atmosphere. So in terms of being a subscription, I mean, yeah, we definitely look to have customers, they come in from the moment they leave home. So it's them together with their parents make a big choice. And we're able to really, with our co-working, our co-living facilities, the various hotel rooms and the network that we have, really take care of them up until really the moment they start having a family. That's when our space just becomes impractical. They can come back with their kids for sure, but so I think we indeed try to provide something for a longer term journey for our customers.
Yeah. Cool. Like I quite like to actually kind of almost have that together with I think what Rami was saying actually for what Lifehouse is. Like, do you think that there's basically a way that you can almost kind of manage to create kind of spaces for the type of customer that you actually kind of want, and you want to do that at scale? Is that how you kind of think of Lifehouse in a way?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of overlap to what Charlie was saying. In our hotels, it's one of our important things about Lifehouse as a brand is us food and beverage, which we didn't really talk about, and it's a much more fragmented industry than hotels, I would say. But yeah, it's really important for spaces to be active and people to feel comfortable interacting with people. I think to Charlie's point, so much about what a meaningful experience is those organic connections that aren't prescriptive. They're not specific necessarily programming, but if there's a space that can cultivate a community of both travelers and locals, that's really what we aspire to create. 75% of our food and beverage revenue is from locals. And our hotel guests they stay with us not always for practical reasons as much as they can rely on being able to interact with locals that are there. And that's not necessarily a new phenomenon in the boutique hotel industry. But at scale, for us, what's challenging about it, and not to segue away from like tech here, but it's the concepts, the food and beverage concepts are unique to every location, despite the hotel brand being similar. And I think that I don't think food and beverage scales in its creative concepts because people want something truly authentically local. So it's a lot of overlap. I think the challenge that we have relative to Charlie is he's got huge properties and we have small properties. And so it's easier to create energy when you have like 20% capture of in-house guests, and the smaller proproperties are a little more intimate, but also special. So yes.
Can I ask you a question, Richard?
Yeah.
Because indeed the F&B for us is, I don't think we still nailed it. We're doing okay, but it is really hard. You notice on the payroll, the administration. I mean, it's a very labor intensive process. You mentioned that you have different concepts for each location. Interested on how you kind of come up with those concepts, because that's the part we find quite difficult sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of a creative guy at my core, and one thing I noticed, so I used to work at some boutique hotel properties in the past, and one of the kind of bigger theses behind what we're doing was that typically these boutique hotel brands start with a private equity firm. They hire a third-party design or branding agency, and then they get a successful project, and then they say, okay, as we do with anything in private equity, we scale it. And what our thesis is that a customer doesn't want a rigid product. And so what we've really focused a lot on is internalizing all of the creative for food and beverage and design and branding. So actually all of our properties have their own design aesthetic, and we've tried to take a 6-month creative process and we've shrunk it down to like 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We do it all in-house. We internalize renderings, graphic design. We basically have a big branding and creative agency in-house. Yeah. So it's iterative with our development team as well, so that our F&B guys doing the kitchen space planning and creating concepts that respond not only to the floor plans but also the kitchen equipment. And we are not asset heavy, so we don't have the luxury of creating a space with our own capital. So we always have to kind of find ways to respond to what's there. And also they're smaller venues than what you're working with. So it's relatively, easier to be successful in a small, I think what our locals want is something that's really authentically local. And so in order to create that, it's easier to create that when it's small, hidden, as opposed to some bigger hotel lobby.
Yeah, nice. So maybe actually moving that to Calvin, because I think that's a nice kind of like segue into it. I think the two themes are basically creating that sense of community within what you're building, and trying to kind of do that at the various kind of different scales. So whether it's with a large monolith or with I guess kind of distributed spaces, and trying to still kind of bring them together. How do you guys find the way to be able to actually kind of do that again, probably at scale?
How to create community, is that the question?
Yeah.
I suppose, that I wouldn't say that we're not trying to create community, but I think that our model's more driven towards making sure you have that unique product in your room more than anything. And of course, like we have fantastic rooftop pools and stuff like that, which are, for the enjoyment of the guests and all that. But I guess I suppose our community most likely starts in the room where you have friends that can travel at you're probably shedding off 25 to 30% at least of the price of a normal 4.5 star room. So you're getting similar quality of product. You've got your own bedroom, but then you and your friends have a fully functional kitchen, a big living room. We have fantastic ocean view, terraces and stuff like that, you couldn't pile 4 Hampton Inn rooms on top of themselves for the same price and get that kind of product. So I think, probably where our community starts the most is in kind of like group and friend travel, which I think is one arena, which is almost our Gen Z and millennial generation. And then the other top half of our millennial and Gen X traveler, in a lot of cases, we find is definitely the family travel that, again, wants the ability to have kids, parents can go and have separate space, but they can see everybody. So there's a lot of families. And then we go back into the lower millennial and Gen Z generation once we get to like the avocado toast spreading baby boomers, who also really like to travel as families as well, or as groups as well. And then oftentimes those end up being kind of a 1 or 2 month stay in a lot of cases. Yeah, and so again, there's opportunity for it in the common spaces, but I think we're really targeting that the room is the place where you have that flexibility for your own mini groups.
Yeah. And so does that kind of, for example, play into like, how strict are you guys? I guess it kind of goes into everything about, for example, like segmenting the type of customer that you're trying to actually kind of, like, do you do it that you kind of go, okay, well, we're actually trying to only kind of reach this type of customer. And we kind of don't care about the rest, or is it because I think the one thing that's kind of crumbling in the hospitality sector is the idea that you're a kind of everything shop, that you're going to be basically everything to everyone. Does that play into the way that you guys think about it?
No, I think, in the current environment, we're mostly looking for the customers that pay with real money. My favorite kind of customer currently. But I think long-term, I don't know. I think that when we talk about, I mean, the industry is really frumpy when it comes to segmentation, right? And segmentation is a world of 10 or 15 lenses of permutations, right? Which creates hundreds of thousands of cost of acquisition. The channel derives from the behavior that they're buying, the behavior that they come through, what sort of product you're selling, not only physically, but also with lead times and length of stays and cancellation policies, and all those manipulate the kind of customer that shows up on your digital platform and books you. So I think that I would say to some degree, there's almost like, I don't know, I've been doing distribution and revenue management and stuff like that for a solid 10 or 15 years in the most complex places. And I just think that we sort of oversimplify the customer behavior, and it wouldn't take much more than just looking at your own behaviors to understand how truly complex it is, how many hours, how many platforms you look. I mean, I'm sure many of us, when we're booking travel, I always find the best value I can find, within a city that's cancelable 48 hours before I go look at my options and reassess. I mean, I'm looking at, resort fees on Hotwire to find out which one is this. I mean, like, I can find any hotel anywhere. I don't need employee discount, right? And I think there's Google Flights, which is now into hotels, is the perfect example of how the consumer wants to shop. They want all the options, all the filters, all the visibility to find what they want. And so I guess I think that I don't know that there's any reward for really trying to restrict your exact traveler, despite marketing kind of intentionally to some places. But right now, I think I'm trying to figure out, really understand what those paths are to travel. And as I see something really, produced, then I think we'll maybe pursue and chase it. But that can go right down to your, hi, sweetie.
We're having a definitely work at home quarantine Zoom call.
Yeah, exactly. That,
Right.
I don't know. I think that there's, sometimes you can over segment in a way that you no longer see your traveler as they actually are. And so my objective is to see them and to evolve in an agile method, that my customer acquisition strategies, whether it is literally who I hire on a sales team and do I need to transition them into Google Meta ads because they're not producing anymore, or because one channel isn't producing for 12 hours in a row, and we shift and we're agile and, we run our customer acquisition like a Wall Street day trading war room. Is my kind of cliche line, I say.
Nice. Does that differ to you guys? For example, Rami, or do you find the same kind of concept around it?
No, I think there's a lot of overlap. I think there's probably a lot of differences between. Well, I think Domio is unique. I think probably in that it's hotel, like it's buildings, not fragmented units, which Airbnb kind of has, or some of the other platforms have. But yeah, I think meta search is taking over customer acquisition in a big way, Google specifically. And I know some of the other groups are trying desperately to compete with that. And I think to Calvin's point, you have customers have access to a ton of information, and they want that information in the most succinct, accessible format. And I think in time, there's ways to cultivate community and the right kind of types of travelers to your hotel, I think, through targeted digital marketing. But it's perishable, and you need to fill up rooms. And I think it's, especially with an asset light business, we have hotel owners that we need to please. And so our view is, I think, yes, similar to, I think the broad theme here is community cultivates somewhat organically, and you have to kind of not prescribe it. And that's actually quite refreshing to hear Calvin say that that it's not a community-driven product in the public spaces, which is like Airbnb's whole brand, which is somewhat of an oxymoron. So yeah, I think there's a lot of shared similarity with what
but it is, if I may, Rami, what I find interesting is, if I see, so for example, going to New York, and then I saw that the Hoxton Hotel was open, I know what type of crowd is going to be in the Hoxton, so I can decide if it's the right type of place for me to stay in depending if I'm going with my girlfriend without kids, or my friends, or business, or whatever. And I think the emergence of the community-based hotels, you saw it with, you know, Ace, 25 hours maybe, but let's say Ace, Soho House. You know, there's you know what you're getting when you go there, and you go there for a specific reason because you want to be part of that community, which I think was really missing from the bigger hotels. You know, you go to a Marriott, what are you part of? You know, there's nothing going on. There's nothing there. So we used to leave as soon as we walked in, and we'd go to Starbucks and work in Starbucks because we also knew what type of community we're getting there. I think what we do, I mean, I will caveat this, Calvin, you're absolutely right. Any customer who wants to come and book a room at the moment is welcome. It doesn't matter who the hell they are. Please come.
I've been considered a genius in the field for those thoughts.
Yeah. And Rami, it doesn't make it easier because you own your own asset. An empty hotel is an empty hotel.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I do find that we are now, and I think, you know, we're doing a lot of work during this crisis to really think about, okay, what have we been doing? And what do we want to do? What was working really well? What wasn't working well? What can we do better? And I think one of the things that we realize is indeed identifying what type of customer we want and what type of customer we don't want. I mean, of course, everybody's welcome for sure, especially with us and our mindset. But, you know, we look at the corporate traveler and we define ourselves as the new generation corporate traveler, the home for them. You know, and I would argue that we're probably new generation corporate guys. We walk into our shitty old hotel, corporate hotel. We're never going to use the business center because we know it's crap. We know it's a horrible place to go. We're not even going to look at it. But our new generation corporate traveler has access to co-working, has access to the local entrepreneurs and the local startups and local mentality. There's a programming talking about whatever, you know. So we have to profile ourselves a little bit and go through a transition period where we were just taking any business to now specifically trying to say, we actually want the new generation corporate travelers. And what we've done is we come up with, we did a lot of research on this. It doesn't exist. I mean, it's a mindset. You know, what we found is if people understand what a new gen corporate traveler is, they probably are one. And if they don't, they're not one. But how do you market that? And how do you position that? So slowly we're trying to define our mindset because we realize then that the reviews are better. They're much happier. Of course, their spend and time within the building is much better. The contribution to community is much better. They're walking out with a bigger smile on their face, and they're more likely to direct book with us. So I do think there's the ways that we have to battle Google, and we're talking about Google and the OTAs, and you know, you have to differentiate yourself and specifically say, look, you and me are meant to be together at this moment. And it doesn't mean that everybody else is not welcome, but you're focusing a bit narrower on a certain client.
Yeah, like I do think that kind of brings up an interesting avenue in terms of, you know, I guess it basically comes down to distribution costs. I think like with OTAs, it's very high. I think the idea that like I think most, or it's high relative to where you'd probably want it to be. You know, versus, for example, Google, I think everyone has this idea that will dramatically bring down distribution costs, basically. And, you know, we'll see. But I think versus essentially having a set customer and understanding how you can kind of provide value for them if you basically have this. Like, I think that also kind of leads into, you know, the effect of this crisis. Do you think that there's anything that you've seen where you're probably kind of accelerating some work in terms of, I guess, the brand positioning and looking at, for example, those distribution options? I know that Calvin, you're a big believer in the fact that actually nothing's really kind of changed. It's just everyone has to just be a little bit more aggressive. I don't know if I'm characterizing it right.
That more on Friday night you're referring to, or
no, I mean like the fact that like there's just like you have to really kind of fight for every single customer. And I think like I think definitely the model that has been before is the fact that, you know, you kind of propped open your property and somehow people kind of poured in from the OTAs. And I think that's probably one thing that's definitely kind of changing with the crisis. But are you guys kind of adapting your brand because of Corona at all? Or do you just see basically like everything's just roughly going to be the same, basically?
Yeah, maybe I kick off looking around the screen. I think what we're finding is, of course, that we're deploying Muse throughout all our hotels, so it's been quite an easy transition. It's gone a bit quicker than we thought because there's not so many bookings to transfer. We've deployed a new revenue management system, which is really easy when there's no revenue to manage. So there's a lot of that. I'm joking, of course. We're very full and not been affected at all by this crisis. But I think we are indeed taking, as I said, we're taking a step back. We planned to do it anyway at this time, to be honest. Because we've grown, so the addition of co-working for us was, well, let's just see if it works. And now we're building co-working units of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square meters in our building. So we're really becoming a co-working, co-living organization. So that was just bolted on. What we also noticed was our corporate structure was very clumsy because the co-working had its own entity, the F&B had its own entity, the ops had its own entity, the land, so we noticed that we need to streamline, we need to empower the hotels much more because we've grown so quickly. So there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes, which is easier because you don't have as many customers, of course. On the other side, this crisis is taking up, as you can imagine, a lot of the management's time and the finance team's time and the banking team time and everything else because you're in a crisis. So. But I think it is difficult. I mean, we've held off. We do marketing because we're actively renting our student rooms today, and luckily a lot of students are booking for September, which is really good. But in terms of your branding and positioning, we're all at home at the moment. And even if I look at myself, I need to go traveling. I need to go and see the hotel in Vienna and in Florence. But I know my girlfriend is a bit worried about it. So I'm also thinking, okay, how do I get there? I don't want to, I want to make everybody happy. I don't want to endanger my family. I don't want to endanger anyone else. So going from traveling 250 times a year to now thinking about, should I get on a plane or not? The amount of money we're allocating to branding is very, very, very small at the moment because people are just not in that decision-making mood.
Rami,
in terms of trying to have more efficient, our fundamental business has always been focused on reducing the cost of delivering a lifestyle experience, if you will. And I use that term lifestyle in quotes, of course. But so we formally launched our white label management company 2 weeks ago, where we kind of basically saw, we'd been doing it in the background, but hotel owners that were kind of oblivious to the fact that they had bad management companies underneath because revenues were high and they thought it was related to their good quality work, which it wasn't. And so we're finding there's an opportunity to kind of bring our efficient cost structure to hotels that we don't even brand. And we're excited about that opportunity, at least in the short term, to help to have some growth. And then we're looking also at some M&A opportunities. I think at our core, I think having been on the real estate private equity side for a while, hotels are complex. And there's a lot of folks, especially in the independent space, that thought, I have a good idea about a brand. And that used to be good enough. And it's no longer good enough. And I think there's a lot of independent hotels that need help. And like you said, either they get married to OTAs, or even if they're barely breaking even, particularly small hotels pre-COVID, it's not going to make sense for them to reopen with a 20-30% haircut to revenue. So we're trying to figure out how we can help those independent hotel owners, and I've talked about it. And so I think it starts with great software.
Yeah, I wasn't actually supposed to be a plug for me. Calvin, are you guys basically kind of like, is there a pivot shift? I know that Airbnb, for example, I think Brian Chesky was talking about the fact that they're going to, pivot to more like long-term stays, and that's going to be much kind of bigger core of what they do. Do you guys find that basically like the crisis is more of an evolution of certain things, or is there discussions towards actually kind of pivoting towards different types of models?
Yeah, I think that it is, I mean, because I'm new, there's a world where I'm kind of, my objective is to build out the strongest engine / strongest and most dynamic widget maker, really, right? Which starts at it's across the board. And I think one of the biggest concepts when people say OTAs are expensive, I would argue 90% of those people probably have garbage attribution modeling in their own media acquisition costs and are probably not understanding how deeply expensive their own cost of acquisitions are. In fact, I would challenge most people to beat a Booking.com 15% commission on consistently driving volume in their own costs. I mean, that is truly incredibly difficult. And so unless you already have and what happens is you're not considering the cost of your rewards program or the cost of, you know what I mean, of the payroll, the people clicking the buttons, right? So all factors in. I think there's a real challenge, and there's a reason, I don't know if you guys have been exposed to this, that Booking.com and Expedia are saying they're going to be likely wiping off like 3-star and below properties off their platforms because they can't make money. Right? Pre-COVID, that's why both of their stocks tanked when they realized like, oh my God, 50% of our revenues are being a third party to a third party, which is Google, which is not a sustainable business, and Wall Street is not valuing it, right? And so I think there's a world where we need to kind of recognize those costs, and to recognize them in a way that you optimize them is to have clear visibility in the transaction by transaction moment and understand what triggers what, which means a world where you're looking at not only your contracts with your third-party partners, what are they allowed to do? What part of the funnel are they allowed to dip into? I mean, you've maybe heard me say this a million times, but I'll just beat the drum because I love the sound. But, we used to have 2 pages of terms on stay away from our SEM terms and our SEO terms and our brand terms. And the new modern SEO and SEM terms are Google Meta, which we have, blindly, free-handedly given over, which ironically the OTAs kind of stepped into, and now they're like, holy cow, we're bidding ourselves. So I'm paying someone to bid against my own direct efforts, which is absolute madness, right? And in fact, I would rather pay an OTA more to bring me incremental business that is away from my bottom of the funnel so that I can capture legitimately my bottom of the funnel at an economized cost, right? So I think there's your third-party contracts, what those terms are. The terms are as important as the cost, which are very myopic on, right? Then, of course, there is your distribution partners and what kind of commercials are in those. Are they a static no matter what? If we have COVID version 2, whose butt gets kicked? Is it all of ours or just mine, right? If I have a set cost or I have a dynamic by revenue or transaction cost situation. And then, of course, there is the way you run your own internal acquisitions, which includes everything from photography, how you index on content versus paid media. I'm a huge fan of content is king over paying for it. To your physical human sales efforts. Are your sales efforts, are they payroll at properties, or are they one serves the many? How are you using technology in that arena? How is sales aligned with revenue and marketing and the efforts and cost of customer acquisition in that arena? So what I'm trying to build ultimately is a world where we have really clean visibility and versatility to dynamically respond to whatever this new world is, which is indefinitely going to be a new world, so that if I have to cut costs, or if I have to pivot, or if I see something of one thing, then I can move. And so again, I would say back to even the marketing efforts, we're actually seeing better ROASs or ROIs on marketing than ever, because everybody else is shut off. You could throw a buffalo nickel at that shit and get returns. So FYI to any of our listeners, consider not showing up. If you're screwing up, if you're screwing up now, there's no turning back, right? And so, I think that is something that's there. And then, my comment to my marketing team is don't screw up more than 12 hours in a row. If you're not getting a return, change it, shut it off and move to something else. I mean, we will turn all SEM off if we have to. I mean, and I've done it for months at different companies, and it is always the right decision, because if the return isn't there, maybe people are not reading words like sassy boutique hotel and booking, and maybe that's not a conversion method that works anymore. So.
I think in terms of like a closing memo or thoughts, I'm a huge fan of actually all the three concepts that you guys represent, and of what you guys are doing, and I really hope that this is, I think the templates that you basically have and the ways that you think about it are what actually gets birthed out of this crisis, that we see more kind of, I think, fully thought through concepts in the entire marketplace. So that's probably something that I'd like to kind of finish on. I don't know if you guys have any closing notes of your own that you'd like to.
Thank you. I'm pleased that Muse is around for us. It's the first system that's really looked at space management or managing space as it should be. So yeah, thank you for your existence as well.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I always get like, when it comes to like direct salesy things, I always got to blush a little bit for it. But thanks.
For the radio listeners, Richard's blushing.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, guys. And yeah, I hope we get to do this again sometime. And yeah, keep safe.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. And nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, you too. Cheers, guys.